This is just a basic guideline of how what I want to talk about in the future, that one can understand a little bit more about who we are, where we're going, and I will draw pages like this that you can start to understand. You can redraw them for yourself to see that you understand who you are and where you're going. Over here at creation, God was speaking to man, and He had communion with man. He talked to man, and He was able to converse with man. Man saw Him, and they seem to have had a good relationship. After the fall of man, when the Nephilim or the Nephilites came in and had children with the woman of man, they were the giants that we read of in the Bible and we see in history, and we see in Greek mythology like Zeus and Achilles and Poseidon. These were the giants, and they had evil intent, and only evil intent. And God said that how long must He tolerate man? In this period, man became up to 900 years old, and God cut it down to 120 years. That's why we only live much shorter now. God decided to destroy the earth, and He found a man called Noah, in approximately 2400 before Christ, who was a righteous man. He walked with God, and him and his family were saved in the ark from the flood. Methuselah was the last one to die of his family of natural causes, so that they didn't die in the flood. So all the family that were important, the fathers died a year before the flood, and then the flood came. I think it must have been a traumatic time for Noah, because if you can imagine, you take only 7 people with you, close family, and all the people that you know from work and church and from your club, from your soccer, they all die. And when you come back to earth a year later, when the ark settles, there's no one on earth except you 8. I think it was a really traumatic time for these people. But man recovered very soon, and they started building the Tower of Babel by a man called Nimrod. He made the city of Nineveh as well. And man was clean for some time, but Nimrod was an evil man, and he hated God, and he built an empire of his own called Babylon. If you look at Babylon, you'll see that the Jews were taken to Babylon in 600 BC, which is 1400 years later. Babylon that Nimrod created took the Jews into exile through King Nebuchadnezzar. These people were scared of the flood at the Tower of Babel, because they took tar and started building the tower that it doesn't get taken away by water again. But God promised with a rainbow that He would never flood the earth again like He did at that time. God dispersed the people over here through language and thought processes. That's why up to today, we haven't recovered from the Tower of Babel yet, because we think differently from each other, and with all these differences, we just can't seem to to do what they did at the Tower of Babel, where they were in one accord and they had one language. The world is heading towards that again, where English is the main language and people think that they can get together via the internet and social groups and one world government. And man has never lost his ability to attract evil. As God promised in Genesis that He would send a Savior, He started the preparation with the Abrahamic covenant, where Abraham had to sacrifice his son. And I will discuss that later on, where Abraham offered his son on Mount Moriah, which is in Jerusalem. Isn't it strange, when the crucifixion took place, God gave His son at the same place in Jerusalem? God took Israel to Egypt, and He led them and He prepared a place for them through Joseph. And He looked after Israel and He took them out again and He gave them His laws. In Exodus 20, in the beginning, Exodus 19:20, if you read it, I read in the New Living Translation, which is easy to read, that I can hear what the story is. God said that He wanted to reveal Himself to man in a personal way. And if you read how He presented Himself to Israel, it's actually scary and fantastic to see that the dark clouds were on the mountain and fire and thunder, that they couldn't bear it. That's how God spoke from the mountain. And Israel said, please don't let God speak to us because we will die. They wanted to hear through the prophets, which was the rejection of God, because He wanted to lead them. And they said no, they'd rather be led by a prophet, or they don't want to let God speak to them lest they die, which is a sad event. Man rejected God in the Garden of Eden as well when they sinned. When the Nephilims came, God was rejected again. The Tower of Babel, man opposed God again. At Mount Sinai, they rejected God again. When they reached the Canaan, which is the promised land, they sent out 12 spies. 10 came back and said that there are 2 very big people there and that they're scared of them, and 2 of them said that they will be able to conquer them with God's help. It was Caleb and Joshua. The 10 of the spies with the bad news died there, and the other 2 could enter the promised land. Israel refused to enter. It was just a few months after they left Egypt, where they could have entered the promised land,